Good afternoon, class. Today we will be presenting aggression in sports. There are many theories out there used to explain sports aggression, and we will cover most of them to some extent, but two theories we have chosen to take a more in-depth view are social learning theory and moral reasoning theory. We will examine these theories and discuss their importance in understanding the causes behind sports aggression. Team members of our effort include Aidan Jablonski, Sam Lose, Nicholas Monosmith, Derek Schoen, Samuel Suggs, Dylan Thompson, and myself, Ryan Wernetsky. Now please join us on this mystical journey into the realm of sports aggression.
Hi, this is Sam Lose talking. I'm going to discuss a lot of the history and a lot of the basis behind aggression and distinguish it from its similar counterparts, who it gets easily confused with. Next, I'm going to give a brief overview of the two theories that we'll be discussing in this presentation and how they relate to aggression. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, aggression is the act of physical or verbal behavior that's directed at someone with the intention to harm that person who does not want to be harmed. There are different types of aggression. There's hostile aggression, which is when a person's motive is to harm someone. A subcategory of this is sports violence. Sports violence is when a person inflicts harm on another player that is totally unrelated to the goals or the outcomes of the competition. Next, there's instrumental aggression, which is when a player inflicts harm on someone, but they do it in order to obtain something of value. Now, both hostile aggression and instrumental aggression can be done either physically or verbally. Next, I want to distinguish aggression from assertiveness. When coaches tell their players to be aggressive, I think a lot of the time they mean assertive. They want their players to take control of the game. Assertiveness is using legitimate physical and verbal behavior to achieve one's goals without an intent to harm. This is different from aggressiveness because they're not attempting to harm anybody, but rather just trying to do all physically necessary to achieve the goals without intentionally harming anybody. It is also important to discuss the fact that we are not born with aggression, according to Bender in 1973. It shows that although you have predisposing genetic factors that make you more likely to be aggressive, most aggressive behavior has to be learned. I think this is a big basis behind his social learning theory. It has also been shown by Pasteur in 1952 that the likeliness of someone acting aggressively can be determined by their ability to justify their frustration. I believe this can also be linked to Bender's social learning theory, and that aggressive behavior can be determined by the outcomes that come with the behavior, whether it be rewards or punishment. Maslow mandated that aggression comes from frustration and the lack of our basic needs being met, just throwing off our equilibrium. This would mean that people only become aggressive when they feel like they need to, and that it is not a basic necessity to life. I think the key factor in all these explanations is that more often than not, something needs to happen in order for a person to become aggressive, as it is not within our basic human nature to want to harm other human beings on purpose. Now, the two theories we're going to talk about in detail today are the social learning theory and the moral reasoning theory. First, we're going to talk about the moral reasoning theory. The moral reasoning theory states that a person's willingness to behave aggressively is a function of his or her level of moral reasoning. This has been shown through countless experiments done by Breda Meyer, and she's also come to the conclusion that sports are structured in a way that encourages bad decision making. Also, she's come to the conclusion that since when you are being aggressive, you are hurting people on purpose, that must mean you have lower moral reasoning. These have come from the basis that morals are a part of sport and need to be thought of as having an impact on how an athlete thinks in competition. An athlete's moral understanding of sport behavior could be a result of multiple factors, such as the coach's differential reinforcement. They could also be perceived by expectations and behavioral modeling by other athletes. To further show that coaches have an impact, it was found that leaders of a local hockey team who focus on ethical values and conduct show lower levels of aggression as measured by total number of penalty minutes played per player. It shows that the people around the athletes have a huge impact on how the athlete is going to react morally in the situation they are put in, such as coaches giving moral instructions instead of aggressive instructions. And this comes back to coaches needing to emphasize assertiveness rather than aggressiveness, which would help the athletes become more physically and mentally prepared for the game. Now the social learning theory, which is largely credited with being attributed to Albert Bandura when he conducted his Bobo doll experiments. It states that aggression is learned through a process of conditioning, which includes both observing and modeling other people's behavior. And seeing it either through personal experience or through observation, those particular behaviors are reinforced. Social atmosphere can also impact how a person acts aggressively because it determines how well received the society will accept the aggression. This comes from a lot of, if you see a team who is full of aggressive players, it stems from a lot of players seeing one player be aggressive, and then they see that act as help the team, or they see that act as a way of enforcing the team, like the Broad Street bullies, and the entire team socially learns from that player and adopts that mantra for that team.
This is Ryan Wernetsky speaking again. I will be explaining sports aggression through the lens of neuropsychology. There are two brain regions that are mainly responsible in the management of aggression. The first region to discuss is the amygdala. There are two of these bulbs which are located within the temporal lobe, and they are responsible for helping to regulate emotion and encode memories with strong emotional bearing. Due to these properties, we can also expect the amygdala to be responsible for regulating our perceptions of and reactions to fear and aggression. In Morris's A Differential Neural Response in the Human Amygdala to Fearful and Happy Facial Expressions, positron emission tomography, also known as PET, measured the neural activity of subjects as they viewed photos of fearful and happy faces. What they found is that the left amygdala responded with greater intensity to fearful faces rather than happy faces. This is extremely important to understanding aggression, since it highlights fear as the underlying cause of aggression. These mechanisms are also vital to explaining observational learning, a key component to Bandura's social learning theory. The most important aspect in sports aggression when it comes to observational learning is how athletes view their teammates and coaches respond to others' aggression and what the outcome of that response is. For example, if the outcome is positive, rewarded, or praised, then that athlete's amygdala remember this as an appropriate response to a similar situation they may personally face. On the other hand, if the outcome is negative or results in punishment, then those actions are likely to be remembered as what not to do. In sports, athletes are constantly observing and experiencing aggressive situations, especially in contact sports. Because of this, our amygdala have connections to a second brain region known as the prefrontal cortex. In Davidson's Dysfunction in the Neural Circuitry of Emotion Regulation, a possible prelude to violence, serotonin is one of the major neurotransmitters released from the prefrontal cortex onto the amygdala. Serotonin has long been hypothesized to have an inhibitory effect on the amygdala and consequently aggression, since the amygdala is responsible for engaging aggressive reactions. Other important functions of the prefrontal cortex include critical thinking, attention, prospective memory, and decision-making. Along with emotional or impulse control, we call these functions executive order. While these two brain structures are important in explaining the mechanisms behind social learning theory, they are likewise important in describing the mechanisms behind Bredemere's moral reasoning theory. In contact sports, athletes often justify their aggression as a necessary component to their success. Athletes who consistently engage in this form of aggression and continue to justify their actions are effectively training their prefrontal cortex not to inhibit their emotional impulses. Without training their prefrontal cortex's synapses with the amygdala, These athletes are more likely to aggress and receive penalties for these actions. In contrast, athletes who don't justify their aggression reflect on their own emotional responses and make consistent efforts not to engage in aggressive behaviors are effectively training their prefrontal cortex's synaptic strength with the amygdala to increase. Synaptic strength increases through increasing the frequency of the neurons firing action. Essentially, once synaptic strength with the prefrontal cortex and amygdala increases, along with the increased serotonin release, these athletes will have greater control over their emotional impulses. When an athlete successfully controls their impulses, this leads to feelings of empowerment and control, which in turn increases the likelihood of controlling future aggressive impulses. However, everyone has a breaking point. It is just a matter of to what degree that stimulus is.
My name is Aidan Jablonski. This is general aggression theory. It is currently the newest and most widely accepted theory of aggression, having been formed by Michael Gottfredson and Travis Hershey. In it, describes aggression as being formed from both individual variables and situational variables that can both lead to aggressive behavior rather than one or the other. In it, feelings, thoughts, and arousal influence appraisal and the decision-making process. It is broad in scope and applied to many domains, whether that be criminology, forensics, or even sports psychology. Frustration aggression theory. A theory formed around the thought that aggression occurs when someone is unable to obtain what they want, and that progression always leads to the desire to aggress. When a person is frustrated, there's a need to aggress against the object of their frustration. And when the object of their frustration is unavailable or unknown to them, their anger will be displaced onto a target in which aggression is possible. This is commonly seen in sports fans. The cognitive perspective of aggression. Human aggression is largely shaped and sustained by cognitive networks, and it is typically driven by anger, an effective response to survival threats, or otherwise stressful experiences, and demarcated by neurophysiological arousal and antagonistic cognitions, such as hostile aggression attributions. To understand aggression more through the perspective of cognitive psychology, from what we understand of it, by elementary school, individual differences in the propensity to behave aggressive are apparent, as we can use their reactions to these situations to predict future reactions that they may have, having their schemata been formed at this point, and this schemata that will be used for their adult life. And though aggressive behavior as a child does not always lead to an aggressive adult, aggression does not appear out of nowhere, as there's a continuity to it. It is something formed as a youth, as a general behavior, and as well, between individuals, there's a difference of aggression shown in boys and girls. Individual aggression increasing for girls, and physical aggression increasing for boys as they age. Though the differences being in these younger times much more minimal. Some influences of aggression: the hostile world schema, the perceived hostility of others where there is none. Long-term goals as well can influence a person's aggression, as a long-term goal can color a person's perspective on the appropriate actions to be taken in the moment. Scripts as well influence aggression, and that the people who are already typically aggressive will reach aggressive actions much quicker than those who are not. Some outside influences of aggression. Children learn how to react to situations from their parents, teachers, and peers, schemas being formed from these reactions, and how they see others react to situations. Aggressive behavior being learned from this. Observation of media, of violence in the media, can prime aggressive thoughts, whether by priming or changing schema, scripts, or belief about aggression. Simply being aware of aggression, being a constant in your life through media can dampen the consequences of aggression to a youth, leading to them being more okay with aggressive acts. As well, social environments can act as a factor for aggression, such as living in a violent neighborhood or growing up in a culture of fear and hate. These causing aggression to become normalized and a standard for those in these situations.
Hello, everyone. This is Samuel Sugg speaking. So I'm here to discuss social learning theory and moral reasoning theory. More importantly, their impact and importance to psychology. So starting with social learning theory, I will be speaking more directly about Albert Bandura and his bubble doll experiment. Albert Bandura conducted an experiment to observe children to see if they would imitate the behavior of their older counterparts. Bandura's experiment is a great example of observational learning, demonstrating that children are able to learn social behavior such as aggression through watching the behavior of another person. Social learning theory is important because it separates us from the theory of behaviorism. Behaviorism is a theory of learning based on the idea that all behaviors are acquired through conditioning with positive and negative reinforcements. Bandura termed this phrase observational learning and characterized the elements of effective observational learning as attention, retention, reciprocation, and motivation. Bandura's work promotes the importance of social influences. You will later hear from Nick Monosmith, giving a prime example of how young athletes can be affected by this theory. In his example, the young children were watching a hockey coach whom they respected take aggressive actions towards a referee, leading to a negative effect on the young players. Social learning theory can be used as a form of prevention for aggressive occurrences. In the field of social learning, Skinner and Bandura both developed models to aid in this field. Skinner's idea of social imitation may hasten or shortcut the acquisition of new behaviors without the necessity of reinforcing successful approximations. While Bandura argues that in social situations, we often learn more rapidly through observing behavior of others. A more accepted model in the field of psychology would be that of Bandura's. In addition to Bandura's model, he found that even young children, when they saw their parents being disciplined for their actions, they still continued to proceed with the aggressive acts against the bubble dolls. Through Bandura's research, there was a development of 4 concepts: behavioral potential, expectancy, reinforcement value, and physiological situation, which eventually led to the formulation of a psychological aggression formula used to measure aggressive acts. The formula only deals with the potential for a given behavior to occur in in relation to a single reinforcement by considering their frequency, intensity, and type of act. Target of the act, and patterns or cycles. Now in this section, I will be speaking on the importance of moral reasoning theory. Humans engage in a large number of evaluative judgments in day-to-day life, deciding when and how to act based upon a given stimuli. Based upon the definition of moral judgment, it is an evaluation based upon the consideration of others, their welfare, rights, fairness, and justice. This gives us the distinguishing factor between moral reasoning and other forms of evaluative reasoning. Jean Piaget devised a tier system model that proposed 4 major stages of cognitive development, broken down into sensory motor intelligence, pre-operational thinking, concrete operational thinking, and formal operational thinking. While Lawrence Kohlberg took Piaget's model and suggested that people move through each stage in a fixed order linked to cognitive development. Kohlberg was able to take the responses of children to develop his theory of moral development. His new model helps us to identify how moral considerations affect us and how we cope with the conflicts and how they move us to act. This gives us distinctive opportunities for insight about how our potential reactions to stimuli. Throughout Piaget studies, we are able to determine that moral reasoning is evident in early childhood. This is established by social orientations, empathetic understanding, and moral awareness. Moral reasoning tendencies in children have been considered to be more prototropic in nature, being robust, consistent, and stable. Resorting to less selfish orientations, moral reasoning theory applies to critical analysis to specific events to determine what is right and wrong. The role of moral reasoning has been the topic of debate in recent psychological research studies on moral judgment.
This is Nick Monosmith, and I'll be talking about transformational leadership, aggression, and social learning. Transformational leadership in children's aggression in team setting, a short-term study, social learning theory, learned by observing interaction and modeling behavior of others. Young people witness role models in social situations and learn behaviors. Short-term study with multi-source data on 183 teenage ice hockey players on 16 teams. Player aggression in penalty minutes was measured by referees was the variable. Team level aggression mediated relationship between team level coach transformational leadership and player aggression. Player transformational leadership did not influence aggression. Social determinants of interpersonal aggression in sports and other settings. Hockey was relatively high of physical aggression and diverse social influences in teams. Transformational leaders can demonstrate ethical behaviors and communicate to limit aggression. Study design is 2 time periods. Surveys completed at midpoint and into the season. Participation was voluntary. Researchers presented while players completed questionnaires. Coaches and parents completed surveys. Participants was 16 teams with 211 players, 327 parents, and 48 coaches responding. How we measured it was player aggression by penalty minutes for rule violations, original copies of game sheets provided to researchers with numbers of and durations of penalties, penalties classified as aggressive or non-aggressive, global transformational leadership scale adapted to measure coach transformational leadership, team aggression calculated by penalty minus on each team. Endorsements of aggression responded to by coaches and parents on a 5-point scale. Just kind of learning about it. Causes of aggression can be learned from multiple sources simultaneously, influence of coaches, peer groups, or parents. behaviors enforced over time through active socialization and social interaction. Aggression in sports and other situations, learn from witnessing others' behavior. Possible therapies, transformational leadership to mediate aggression exhibited by team. Exhibit 4 behaviors, model pro-social behaviors, set high expectations for performance and non-aggression. Challenge to think differently about whether aggression is appropriate, mindful of other needs. Pro-social parenting, encouragement, support, consistent discipline, and affection. Transformational coaches are less likely to endorse aggression in sports. Relationship between team aggression and individual player aggression is significant. Coach leadership affects individual player aggression through team level aggression. The more coaches and parents endorse aggression, the less transformational they were seen. Transformational leaders modeling pro-social behavior in words and actions limit aggression. Leadership behaviors influence players' behavior directly, including aggression. Parents' transformational leadership was not associated with player aggression and as compared to coach and peer group. Compounding factors, aggression was based on multiple influences with coaches, peer groups, and parents. The study was based on one sport, ice hockey. Relatively small sample size with 16 teams. Relevant models impact on case study, social learning theory. Aggression can be learned from social situations in sports affected by coaches, peer groups, and parents. Leadership training can improve transformational leadership to change behavior in authority figures and sports participants. Direct and indirect effects on aggression in athletes from transformational and pro-social leadership behavior. This is just a video of the altercation that happened.
It starts with the coach banging on the door. Profanity shouted, then an argument ensues. The referee ejects the coach from the game, but instead of leaving, he walks out onto the ice.
He spit on him, and he just defended himself. Now he just got up and started throwing punches.
Witnesses at the Bog in Kingston say the coach started it by spitting in the ref's face. The referee eventually tackled to the ground, while 12-year-old children look on.
I just can't believe someone would actually do that.
During a youth hockey game in Kingston, Massachusetts, a local coach had a meltdown. Players were 12 years old. Monarchs youth coach started banging on the door and yelling profanities at the referee. First, there was a minor bench penalty, but the coach continued, so he was ejected by the referee. Coach walked on the ice and spit on the ref's face. Referee protected himself, and the coach started punching the referee and tackled him to the ground. Coach was removed as a coach for the youth organization. Case study on transformational leadership, aggression, and social learning applies to the event at the youth hockey game in Kingston. According to the case study, young athletes witnessed role models in social situations and learned the behaviors. In the case of Kingston coach, 12-year-old players watched coach spit on, punch, and tackle the referee. So these players learned that aggression is okay from the coach's behavior. Hockey has a high rate of physical aggression. Instead of physical altercation, the coach needed to be a transformational leader with ethical behavior and good communication to limit aggression. Transformational leadership can mediate the aggression exhibited by a team. The coach needed to model pro-social behaviors, set high expectations for performance, and non-aggression. Teach that aggression is not appropriate, be mindful of others' needs. Leadership behaviors influence players indirectly, including aggression.
Hello, this is Derek Schoen speaking, and today I will be giving a case study example for moral reasoning and its impact in sports. As stated earlier in the presentation, moral reasoning proposes that a person's willingness to behave aggressively is a function of his or her level of moral reasoning. A person's moral reasoning may be altered based on their history in sports and the result of their behavior in those sports. The longer a person is participating in a sport, the higher the chances they will have a lower moral reasoning, but does not guarantee that everybody will be lower in their moral reasoning. A person behaving aggressively will use moral disengagement to justify their behavior as acceptable or blame their behavior on the actions of an external factor. In this case study, we will be discussing the incident with Michigan's head basketball coach, Juwan Howard. On February 20th, 2022, Michigan played Wisconsin in a men's NCAA basketball game. Michigan ended up losing to Wisconsin 63-77. After the game, both head coaches can be seen yelling at each other during the handshake line, resulting in Howard punching the Wisconsin's assistant coach in the face. This led to the NCAA suspending Howard for the remainder of the regular season. A brief basketball background for Juwan Howard. Howard played for 10 different NBA teams during his lengthy 19-year NBA career, including his tenure on the Miami Heat, where they went to 3 straight NBA championships from the years of 2010 to 2013. In that 3-year span, he won 2 NBA championships in the years of 2011 and 2012, and unfortunately lost the third one with the Heat in 2010. After he retired following the 2013 season with the Heat, he was hired on as an assistant coach for the same team. Howard was an assistant coach for 6 years and lost an NBA championship during his first year in 2013 as assistant coach. In 2019, he moved over to the NCAA, where he currently is in his 3rd year as a Michigan head coach.
Interesting finish here, 77. Oh, see, and they're going at it. Oh, yeah. Howard and Guard are not happy right now as the two of them continue to have words. We told you Juwan Howard was not happy about that timeout. And Juwan Howard just threw a right hand. And now we got a scrum. We have a scrum in Madison. Players are pushing and shoving. This is an ugly scene. This is an ugly scene. Oh, my God.
So what caused Howard to be so aggressive? In the post-game press conference, Howard used disengagement to remove himself from the situation and put the blame on a late game timeout called by Wisconsin that he claims was an unnecessary action and the main cause from being upset. With 20 seconds left and while being up by double digits, Wisconsin called this timeout. And during this timeout, celebrations started to occur from the Wisconsin bench, and Howard took offense to this timeout, stating that it was unnecessary and wrongfully done. The coaches exchanged words during this timeout and continued to exchange words as they were walking through the post-game handshake line. Howard then attempted to walk past the opposing head coach without shaking his hand and was prevented from doing so. This escalated the tension and caused the remaining coaches to get involved in the scuffle. Howard was then shoved and retaliated by throwing a punch at one of the assistant coaches for Wisconsin, leading to the players to start a brawl between themselves. This also happened a few games prior to the March Madness tournament, and Howard had to miss the remainder of the season up until the tournament started. This isn't Howard's first time being ejected as a head coach. Around the same time last year, he was ejected from a game against Maryland due to a confrontation with their head coach. Howard was trying to argue a call with the ref when the Maryland coach stepped in and told Howard to sit down. This caused a scuffle between the coaches and caused Howard to be ejected after having to be restrained by multiple people. In the post-game press conference, Howard again used disengagement to blame the scuffle on the Maryland bench for handling the situation wrong. And similar to his incidents with Wisconsin, both these ejections happened close to the start of the March Madness tournament. Michigan then went on to win 3 games in the tournament to advance into the Elite 8 before losing by 2 points in a close battle with UCLA. Diving deeper into the why of aggression. The amygdala is in charge of processing memories and creating emotional responses. It plays a role with the limbic, neurologic, and endocrine systems, including our fight or flight response. The hypothalamus also has a big role in aggression by being able to send hormones to the brain to alter a person's heart rate and blood pressure. These hormones don't always go away when a person calms down, as they can last several hours in the body before going away. The hypothalamus also has links to the nervous system and the limbic system when it comes to aggression. The potential cause of Howard's aggression. When Michigan lost to Wisconsin, it put their March Madness hopes in jeopardy. Howard had a goal of winning the NCAA tournament, and Wisconsin got in the way. So when he punched the assistant coach, he attempted to dehumanize his opponents for getting in his way of achieving his full potential. Fear also played a factor. Howard has lost an NBA championship as a player and as an assistant coach. So he knows what it feels like to come up short of having it all. All those memories reprised, hormones were sent to the brain, causing his heart rate and blood pressure to rise, and his emotions heightened as they were able to take control of his body. Coping with aggression can be difficult, but by modeling a pro-social behavior, Howard can attempt to understand the signs of anger and learn strategies to reduce those feelings. Additionally, learning how to stay in control can help during situations of high stress and will allow the team to stay calm during those stressful situations too. And finally, understanding that sports are for the fans and a coach is viewed as a role model for those fans who enjoy those sports can convince him to control his aggression and be better when it comes to anger and how to control that anger.
All right, this is Dylan Thompson speaking now. I'm going to be talking about Ronjed Odor. On May 15th of 2016, there was a MLB game between the Texas Rangers and the Toronto Blue Jays. The setting is the top of the 8th inning. Rangers are leading 7-6 with a runner on first. The batter hits a ground ball to short, and the Rangers third baseman, Adrian Beltre, flips the ball to second. The runner is Blue Jays right fielder Jose Bautista, who slides into the second baseman for the Rangers, Ronjed Odor, which results in an errant throw over to first. After the errant throw over to first base, Bautista stands up and Odor shoves, then punches Bautista after exchanging some heated words, causing both teams to clear the dugouts in a brawl that takes the officials just under 10 minutes to get under control. 2 days later, Odor was punished with an 8-game suspension by the league, which he had appealed down to a 7-game suspension later. All right, so here we can see what led to the exchange between the two teams.
Got now, here's the play as it occurred.
No doubt what he was trying to do at second base.
Sure. And now DeMar O'Hale getting an explanation. Here's the close-up.
That's the kind of slide they're trying to eliminate.
Yep. And I think Odor, you saw Odor dropping down. Rudin said, nope. Whoa.
I think Bautista got all he could handle with that.
Odor's now 2 for 5 today.
Wow. That's some pretty solid contact right there.
Yep.
That was an illegal slide. It's got to be a double play. That's what they're trying to eliminate. Trying to hurt the middle infielder by sliding.
Now, within the MLB, Odor does have a reputation that causes opponents and opposing fans to harbor strong distaste for him, while his teammates and the Texas Rangers faithful at the time loved him and had his back completely. In an article with Bleacher Report, the Oakland Athletics catcher Stephen Vaught said he plays with a lot of emotion. He's a really good player, and I think that's why he rubs people the wrong way. Within the same article, his teammate, Adrian Beltre, said he has a little flavor to his game. And I understand from the other side, sometimes it doesn't look too good, but here we embrace it. Now, Odor does have a history with being a bit of a hothead. This is not the first time he's shown a little aggression within the sport of baseball. In 2015, he and the Houston Astros catcher, Hank Conger, got into a heated discussion at the start of his at-bat that led to the bench's clearing. In 2011, he was the catalyst for another bench-clearing brawl in a single-A minor league game while playing for the Spokane Indians that earned him a 4-game suspension and led to a record 51 players being fined by the Northwest League. As Derek has already discussed in the presentation, the amygdala and the hypothalamus are both in charge of the biology of aggression. We also know that the psychological side can be rooted in Maslow's hierarchy of need, as well as a link to fear. Aggression can also be linked to what is colloquially known as little man syndrome, and some speculate that may be the case for Odor, who does stand at 5'8". Little man syndrome, or the Napoleon complex, is a type of inferiority complex associated with individuals that are shorter in stature, much like the complex's namesake, Napoleon I, the Emperor of France, who took over a large swath of Europe and even pushed up into Russia, as some may speculate, a way of proving himself to be more than just his height. This complex usually has its roots in some form of childhood bullying, which can follow the child and individual into adulthood, where they can seek control and power over others, which can be expressed through aggression. In order to cope with this complex, I believe that cognitive behavioral therapy would be most appropriate to assist in helping one to get over such a complex by learning to develop confidence in one's own abilities, gaining a greater understanding of what others' motivation and behaviors are, and facing the individual's fears rather than choosing to avoid them.
Thank you all for joyfully watching our presentation. Here are our references.